wizards and muggles alike. Welcome to another episode of the Wizard Factory podcast. This is episode 6, and today we have a special guest, Greg Papanicolaou. Greg is a physical training coach with his company, Anarchy Lifting. He is also an online teacher that creates occult study lessons and projects for homeschoolers. Welcome, Greg. Great to have you, man.
Awesome. Thank you guys for having me. I'm excited about this.
Awesome. We're very excited.
And so today we're going to be getting into a topic that's very dear to all of our hearts. We've been, kind of discussing this and wanting to, bring it to light for a good time now. And the topic is healing the wounded warrior, and essentially looking at the dynamic of the sacred masculine in this particular topic, and just kind of like unpacking the ways that the masculine archetype is wounded and in need of healing desperately in this hour. So, Brian, do you want to start off with the so where's the trauma begin? Do you think?
Yes, so I think a big one here, and specifically in context, to the United States and our Western society, is circumcision. I think this is a trauma that is normalized, but a lot of people don't actually understand what's going on. They think it's a simple little thing, a simple snip, and it's done for medical reasons or whatever, and that's just not the case. And I think there's a lot of ways we can see this play out. Do you want to kind of do a little, get into it a little bit here, and then we'll just start going?
Yeah. Well, I know for myself, I was circumcised. I believe Brian was. Not sure about Greg.
Yeah, I was.
Okay. So, we're all coming from experience here. And honestly, I can say for the better part of my life, up until I was maybe 29 years old, I never even given it a second thought, never thought anything of it, just totally normalized. And then I was in a relationship with a girl who's very, very adamant. She calls herself an intactivist. She really opened my eyes to this dynamic and the harmful effects that is caused by this, normalized routine, the terminology all around it just alone is very shocking when you start really thinking about it. And for anyone who's maybe unfamiliar with this or never really questioned or thought about it, or if you maybe you have and you feel convinced that it's necessary for medical reasons or whatever, I have 2 films that I would encourage you to take a look at. One is called American Circumcision. I think it's on Netflix. I'm not too sure about that, and then the other one is a shorter one on YouTube. It's a little presentation. It's about half an hour long, called The Elephant in the Room. And I mean, I think after the way that the information is laid out in these, it's just, you can't question it at that point. It's painfully obvious, pun intended, that there is no real medical benefits any more than saying we should cut our armpits off so we don't have to wash our arm. It's absolutely ridiculous. And then weigh that in comparison with the very observable, measurable, quantifiable damage that is done psychologically, physically, on every level. Watch the films. It gets into depth, but just to name a couple, there are 10 to 20,000 nerve endings in the foreskin, and that those are completely severed and gone, and that is a large reason why erectile dysfunction and difficulties in achieving orgasm and things like that for men is so prevalent. And of course, there's always a pharmaceutical industry that's kind of coming in, and they sell the
magic pill.
Yes. They sell the foreskins to companies that turn it into anti-aging creams. So there's literally a lot of industries that profit off of the mutilation of little babies. I mean, it's so beyond fucked up.
Yeah.
And again, we can, without getting into too much depth, because those two films really like lay it out very, very well. So we don't necessarily have to get into all those details. But yeah, you guys want to add anything here?
Yeah, I will. After Greg does, go ahead, Greg, and then I'll get into it more too.
Yeah, absolutely. I just the idea of that early trauma before you're even conscious of it is incredibly dramatic and incredibly violent. So the feeling of your armoring being taken away from you, being completely destroyed, even if it's just such a small part, but it's a major source of your being. I mean, that's your the source of your life energy, your the area around your body that all source of energy and life comes from, and that's creation right there. So it's very traumatic that that's being sort of robbed of you at such an early age.
Yeah, I think this is obviously there's a lot we can get into here with this, but I think let's like step back for a second and let's look at one of the reasons of why it is such a horrible act. And first, to do that, I think in a fullness we need to look at how beautiful and spiritual of an act that birth actually is. That another form of individuation of consciousness is coming into this physical reality field. It's an extremely beautiful experience. And whenever the child is first born, there's their brain and neural pathways, they're developing and there's a certain period of time that those chemicals and things that are going on, they only happen then, never again. And the stimuli that is put there changes the brain function for the rest of their life. And they've done, you can look it up, they've done fMRI scans on this and studies with circumcision that their brain never goes back to being the same. So it's supposed to be this very sacred process, coming to existence that needs to be nurtured and cared for, and then to be violently and sexually traumatizing them like that. It's absolute inversion of what should be, and I think there's some really horrible premises that this is built upon, like underlyingly kind of that whole idea that you're imperfect, like that's the first message we're sending to our young men, that, you weren't born the way you were supposed to, so now we need to mutilate you to fix you.
Right.
And look at where did this practice come from? What's an underlying premise? We talk about that, the Abrahamic belief systems and how they have this kind of underlying premise in them.
It's the original sin of the medical world.
Yes.
Born, dirty and, weird and all this kind of stuff. And we need to fix you. Medical science, the God of science, needs to fix you. And that's the thing that I really want to stress here is this. I mean, this is not just a matter of scientific medical ignorance. This is very, very deliberately done for a specific reason. It is a black magic ritual done to every infant male in the West, and for a very specific reason, to stifle the sexual energy, to change the brain chemistry, as you said, Brian. I mean, this is no accident.
For life.
We didn't know.
Right.
For life. Yes, and it's very deliberately done. And we can kind of look at this in sort of a symbolic or a metaphorical perspective of your sword is like, the phallus is sort of your sword. And the sword in the occult represents truth, knowledge, like cutting through the bullshit, cutting through the ignorance, slaying evil. And so when they blunt and dull your sword right from the get-go, right out of the gate, so to speak, again, this is no accident. We're basically being disarmed violently on a energetic and metaphysical level. That's the way I see it.
Absolutely. The next little point, we were talking about, here, and this ties in perfectly, is that, how this is really forming the foundation for the trauma-based mind control. And they're targeting the men because, why is it? We're the protectors. We're supposed to be the warrior that can stand up and say, no, this isn't going to happen. Mm-hmm. And that's very, as Logan said, very deliberately being done. And Logan, you were talking about earlier the two different nervous systems, the sympathetic and the parasympathetic. Would you like to get into that a little bit?
Yeah. Yes, it's sort of the two different modes, which is, of course, a reflection of the principle of gender and polarity, where it's the masculine and feminine aspects of the nervous system, where one is, the sympathetic is the fight or flight response, and that would be the masculine. Again, fight or flight. It's the protector. It's the how to stay alive. It's their survival instinct. And then the parasympathetic is referred to as the rest and digest. So that's sort of the feminine nurture, care, take it easy, relax, everything is fine, you're safe, that sort of thing. And, both of those are integral systems and need to be balanced and, depending on what situation you're in. But again, the mind control, the trauma-based mind control is designed to, like you said, rewire your brain to where it is very, very biased or has a tendency towards the sympathetic aspect. That's why they everyone's so stressed out, they're depressed, because the world is seen as hostile from their poison worldview, and this is how you sell pharmaceuticals and antidepressants, and you're stressed out, here's the magic pill and make you happy, and that's the thing, is like, again, with the circumcision, is that act is basically saying, welcome to the earth, welcome to life, have some trauma. The world is a dangerous place, and it's out to get you, and it's going to cut parts of your body off of you without your permission. I mean, it's so beyond
the foundational brain chemistry. They're setting it up that, because it's like setting up the whole mindset for the entire lifetime with that, is that instead of having a world that's where you're safe and protected and things are okay, no, the world is harsh, it's evil, it's going to hurt you. Yes. And then look at how many people are playing from that wounded mindset. Why are people advocating for government and everything? Because they're so afraid. And it's on an unconscious level, because this trauma has been pushed and shoved down, and it's too hard to deal with. They don't have the knowledge and the tools or even the willpower to start delving into that, because it is kind of hard to look at when you start looking at it, especially if, I know in my personal experience over the last few years, I've been delving into this, a lot of different feelings and emotions come up. Absolutely.
Yeah. And in fact, I could add in that, again, with this initial act right out of the gate, you could look at it like they're formatting the hard drive to install their satanic mindset onto you, because you were just saying yourself, this is the underlying belief that drives the satanic mindset of, it's dog eat dog. If I don't fuck somebody else over, they're going to do it to me first. So I've got it, it's all there. So they're setting you up right out of the gate to adopt their mini-me satanic mindset right there.
That's very good.
Right. Yeah. And the fact that it's happening, like we said, so early on in the process of just your childhood, as a newborn baby, you're not able to this isn't able to register with you.
Zero defenses.
Right. And by the time you're yeah, I mean, that's the thing, is as soon as you're reaching the age of, say, 4 or 5, and the normal sort of like, minuscule traumatic experiences like scraping your knee are happening, that's when you're having like your initial trauma, and as small as they are, those should be in comparison, the aspects of you experiencing those traumatic experiences on a lot lesser level than having something so harsh happen to you
Yeah.
and violent happen to you even before you're able to run out and bump your head into chairs.
Exactly. I mean,
You know?
any given adult would be traumatized,
Mhm.
especially, you know, again, it's not even like, oh, I decided I'm gonna get circumcised. It's no, we're gonna strap you down to a freaking, you know, table, restrain your whole body, and you're screaming in pain. You have zero idea what's going on.
Lights in your eyes when you're used to
Yeah,
being
bright lights, fresh out of the dark womb of safety, and then you've got all these lights in your face, and then they're strapping you down and
Right.
you know, touching you and cutting parts off your body. It's awful.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
I think something we can, you know, delve into just a little bit more here, and you know, Greg, this I'm sure is something you can relate to, is that, you know, as a parent, you know, and especially as a father, it's your role to protect that child, you know. And that's one thing, you know, I have to say with my son, you know, they tried to normalize it so much, like when we were there, you know, like we refused the fucking eye drop, vitamin K, you know, because they just give that to them in case they bleed, because, you know, they're going to circumcise them. And I refused that. I was like, he doesn't need that. He'll produce it naturally in a few days.
Right.
And they're like, well, what happens if he bleeds when he's circumcised? It's like, well, he's not going to be. It's like, if anybody tries to mutilate my son, like, you're gonna have a fucking problem. And that's, you know, stepping into that sacred masculine role. But then their energy totally changed. But that's, you need to be able to at times step up and say, no, fuck no, it's not going to happen. Because that's how we need to address this.
Mm-hmm.
That's the masculine energy that they're stealing from you. So it's a cycle. If you were emasculated and they took that part of you and when you were born, and then, you know, it comes that time and your child is born and they're saying, well, you know, are you going to circumcise? You know, it's, you know, science says it's good for you. Then the emasculated male is just going to be like, oh yeah, I suppose that would be okay, and not really question it, versus where you just stepped into your divine masculine and said, no, you're not going to touch my son that way, you know?
Right. And again, you get in that protective mode, and that's what I did the same thing Brian did. And then they sort of look at you like you have two heads, like you're saying. You know, it's like, no, this is, you know, intentionally bad and immoral, and it should not happen. And again, it's from right out of the womb, as we say. It's what, you know, they're going to pump you full of every drug that, you know, they could imagine. And you know, it happens, you know, as they're growing up and as they get sort of indoctrinated into the compulsory schooling. And my goodness, it's like something like, I think I read, like 1 in 5 kids are diagnosed with, you know, ADHD. And you know,
they're just normal little boys, you know.
Right, just normal little boys just running around, and with their energy expenditure, they need to spend it doing healthy activities, and you know, we're automatically misdiagnosing by things that are normal behavior. And you know, that's the thing, is that the next step, what they usually do after the drugging, is they start to suggest things like behavioral therapy. Well, whose therapy and whose behavior are we trying to please here? We're pleasing the control, the control, you know, the control elite that really are at the forefront of monitoring and checking all the boxes and controlling the behavior in the first place. So who are we behaving for exactly?
Yeah, that's a great point.
Is anyone else here diagnosed and medicated with? Because I personally was diagnosed with ADD and put on Ritalin until I started. Well, you know, I didn't like it, and I would basically like skip lunch because I had zero appetite, because I was essentially on meth, and I just wanted to go out and play, you know, bang bang, shoot 'em up with my buddies on the playground. So I would just like eat the meat out of my Lunchable and throw the rest away and go play. Well, at the point where I was clawing at my thighs like this and rocking back and forth and saying, I hate myself, my mom saw that and she was like, okay, we're gonna not do that anymore. You know, took me off the meds finally and put me on some nutritional supplements and stuff like that. So
good.
Yeah, no, luckily I didn't get any kind of like diagnosis. My medicating came later on when I was in the Marine Corps. And then they just, that's another thing we can tie into with another point later on, is how, they medicate the men, they get the young boys medicated, and, like I said, they set up the cycle of trauma. So this extends into the adulthood for, the vast majority of men, especially in our society. But Logan had, I think, a really great point when we were talking about what happens is that they're actually disconnecting us from the feminine. And you were talking earlier about how you could tie that in with the law of correspondence, Logan. Would you like to riff on that real quick too?
Yeah, totally. I mean, we hear all this talk these days about toxic masculinity, and I can see where this idea is coming from. I can somewhat relate to, men who are abusive and controlling and all this kind of thing. But I just think it's a misnomer, because it's not masculinity that's toxic. It's wounded, and what makes it wounded is it is actually disconnected from the feminine principle of care. So a man who's in his masculine but is disconnected from his heart-based intelligence, that's when it becomes toxic, because then it's pure left brain, it's pure reptilian R complex, control the environment, extract resources and do whatever it takes to, crush the competition. It's, again, the satanic mindset in a nutshell right there, world. And so it's just ironic that, it's being put in such a way to present and kind of lead this idea that masculinity itself is toxic, versus just wounded and in need of care from the very people that tend to be the ones throwing this term around. The female, the woman, the feminine energy of care and nurture is the only thing that's actually going to make that non-toxic, that's going to change that dynamic.
Yeah, it's a continuation of the suppression that they're trying to start, they're inflicting at birth. That's a suppression where they're trying to suppress your masculine, your warrior sense. And then later on, what are they telling you? Oh, if you are becoming masculine, that's toxic. You don't want that. It's just a continued suppression and war on it.
In fact, the irony that's jumping out here at me is in fact that the so-called feminist, we're not talking about the feminism that means, equality. We're talking about the feminists that are talking about, men are dogs. We need to subjugate them, castrate them, all the crazy stuff that
the really loopy ones. Yeah.
And the irony here is that form of feminism is actually toxic masculinity as well.
Right.
Because they themselves are disconnected from their own heart-based intelligence.
Right. Yeah. And this sort of goes exactly. Yeah. And that kind of goes back to just like different aspects of the male, themselves, or like, you have the overly masculine, and at least with the Western culture, the overly masculine is, the emotionally unavailable gentleman that's sitting on watching my foosball, just ignoring everything else around me, ignoring reality. And then of course you have the overly feminized, which is what we see a lot more today, which is they want to create the safety in their female friends because they want to be them. They really want to be that feminine figure. And so, they're the sort of non-assertive energy that develops, over time, because you only seek approval and emotional stability from the feminine only. Right. And then of course you have the more balanced, which we, understand as the hero, right? The hero is essentially the balanced male. Yeah.
That's what they're actually attacking is the balanced individual, whether they're male or female. That's what they don't want. They want people polarized. So if you're going to be, masculine, you better be like order follower, dominator, controller, heartless, whatever. And if not, if you're going to be feminine, then you better be totally like disempowered, don't know your boundaries, don't know how to say no, just kind of go along to get along, and very supplicating and all that kind of stuff. Because both of them are useful to their agenda. They're either going to be part of the ruling class, someone to enforce the control system, or the slave that falls in line to that.
Yep, exactly. So let's look at how this, some of the ways this trauma happens, and what happens with trauma. It needs to be expressed. And when it's not properly expressed, psychological symptoms will develop. Like that's where, PTSD comes from. It's post-traumatic stress disorder. So what's happening is there's a traumatic event that you had to, put down, whatever to get through that event. And then later on, it's coming up. It needs to be processed, but people don't know how to process it. So then they see it as this really horrible thing, and it's something that you're always going to have, and things like that. So I think, this is, this major trauma, these psychological things going on. And then we're telling our young boys that, that the whole kind of concept of, boys shouldn't cry, men shouldn't cry. You shouldn't express these certain emotions, because then it's further disconnecting them from the feminine. It's not allowing them to process that trauma. They're shoving it down to the unconscious mind, where when you understand how that works, you only guarantee that's because that's the like I talked about before, it's like that big 2,000-pound gorilla, and it's running the vast majority of our behavior. So it's the mind control to inflict the trauma, but then you have to start pushing it down into the subconscious and then down into the unconscious. And this is done through these enforcements of ideas like young boys shouldn't express emotions, or you shouldn't cry, or it's unmanly to do that. Right.
Because why are we being taught that? It's told under this guise of like, if you show your emotions, that makes you weak. It makes you're showing your vulnerability, of course. And I mean, there is a little bit of truth to that, because to another satanic-minded or like, ego-driven person, they will see that as a weakness. And so it's coming back to the axiom of the preconceived worldview that, again, the world is hostile. Everyone's out to get you. Everyone's just observing you to, see your weaknesses to be exploited and all this kind of stuff, rather than actually being a holistic human being that is, not perfect, that has weaknesses. And
I got a big hit on something that you said there, that what it is whenever, how do I sum this up? So the person that, you don't want to be weak. Why would the person be afraid of being weak? Because they feel disempowered and weak, because they've been traumatized. So they get you into that state of mind, and then you project, I don't want to be weak because I already feel disempowered and weak. So I don't need that. So you're fighting and raging conflict against yourself, and then you overcompensate.
Right. And then of course there's the fear of judgment. It's if I'm expressing this, to someone who, that's just there, that I may or may not trust, but I'm trying to confide in someone, and they immediately reject you, then your whole mindset is going to change, and not trust, expressing that willfully to anyone.
Oh, that's good. Yeah. Very good.
Well, it's like compounding trauma, because you're already traumatized, and then you're just trying to fucking express that so you can get it out, and then they reject you, or they judge you, and they start ridiculing you and saying you're weak. Then that's further traumatizing you, which makes you feel further less safe to express again in the future. You're just like, oh, well, I tried that and that didn't work. People only just are out to, screw you over or whatever.
Right. And then we either internalize it, and depression and...
Oh, wait for Greg to come back on here.
Yeah, that's a mindset you see a lot these days, is just like, don't trust anyone. I don't trust anyone but myself. These hoes ain't loyal, all that kind of thing.
Yeah.
Like that's where that's coming from, is that
absolutely
trauma.
Let's look at another way this trauma gets enforced. Spanking. Another type of violence that's normalized. Let's call it what it is. And we can look at, and there's
sexual abuse.
back this up as well. But, you know, when you're hitting a child there, you know, you're hitting them right at the base of the spine, you know, so right in the nervous system. It's going up directly into the, you know, reptilian brain, which deals with fight and flight. So it's this continued message of the world is hostile. You're not safe.
Right. And what happens when I disobey authority?
Yes.
That's why I always say
Exactly.
spanking is the you know, the POV lane to the statist mindset, because that is like repetitive, you know, Pavlovian programming of, if I act out of line, bad things, literally, you know, violent things will happen to me, and it's okay for them to do it because they're my parents. And you know, that whole, when you question your parents and they say, because I said so.
Yeah.
That right there is programming that you don't question it. You don't need to understand it. You just need to, all you need to know is, if you don't do what I say, this bad thing will happen to you.
Right. Yeah.
Absolutely.
And it generally, I mean, it's going to add another, I guess, element or another aspect to the fight or flight response, that like the freeze, that's the third, you know, response that it induces. So then now, you know, when someone is in a stressful situation or confronted with something, they either, you know, instead of either running away or fighting, there's now the freeze. Now they're stuck in ice.
You could almost look at that as the disempowered masculine energy.
Exactly.
The masculine, just because it's running away, that's sometimes the wise thing to do, and that's how you stay alive. By freezing, because that action, that decisiveness, do I fly, you know, do I fight or do I fly? You've been robbed of that male decisiveness, and so you play the what is it, the possum or whatever that just rolls over and plays dead, like, oh, I'm not a threat, that's right, masculine right there.
I think another, go ahead, sorry, my bad.
No, go ahead, Brian.
So I was going to say, you know, another, you know, not only, you know, on the physical aspect, are we looking at that when spanking, you know, it's hitting, you know, the lower spine, things like that. We can also see that, you know, on the spiritual level, on the energetic level, that's where, you know, the area of the root chakra and thing, you know, that which deals with creativity and that masculine energy, that push forward. And when you're doing that, you know, it's another type of sexual trauma, you know. So like I said, it's just impacting the layers after layers, and the way we're treating our young boys, and you know, even our children in general as a society, is really fucking disgusting. And people need to take a look back, and the whole excuse of, oh, my parents did it to me and I turned out just fine. Well, maybe consider that if you think it's okay to do that to children, maybe you didn't turn out so fucking all right.
Exactly.
Like, look at yourself honestly, and look at the consequences and the effects of what your actions are actually doing and creating in the world. Because it's not just this little procedure. It's not just this little thing. These are all things, you know, that one little bit of information at a time builds and builds and builds. And that's what creates our reality.
Right.
Yeah. That's the thing, is aggregately, once all that behavior is expressed throughout, you know, an entire society, which, you know, is sourced originally from the home, then it affects everyone on a mass scale.
Yes.
You know, so how do you reverse that? Well, stopping the cycle is, you know, the obvious way, but educating people on the psychological and the spiritual implications of what you're doing, you know, will start to become sort of I guess hopefully the new narrative, you know, as we push forward. So
And I wanted to throw this out there because obviously, you know, we're framing this whole talk under speaking specifically to the wounded masculine. It's not to say that only boys get spanked necessarily, but first of all, I think anyone who's grew up in a family where spanking is normal, generally the boys tend to get it worse, you know. And again, guess who tends to do the spanking, right? Oh, when your father gets home, there'll be hell to pay. The mother cares too much because she has more of that feminine instinct. And so by being one who spanks the child, you yourself are disconnected from that masculine, because again, what is the masculine role? The protector. How are you protecting your child? When you're the one perpetrating harm again, the one who's supposed to be keeping them safe is telling them, you're not even safe from your own parents. That's how hostile the world is.
Right. No, that's a great point to bring up for sure. Absolutely. So I think another thing we can kind of look at here in this mindset of how the warrior is then disempowered and turned into, dominators and order followers. And it's this idea, that is the glorification of war.
Mm-hmm.
Whole mindset that, that makes you a hero. That's what a man's supposed to do. That's what that's what you do when you protect your family and your country and all these things. And then they play on that, and they also play on the lack of connection of that tribe. Like, we want that connection. We want, as human beings, we're social creatures. We want to have that brotherhood, and that's a huge thing. Logan and I were both in the military. It's a huge thing, a major factor in what actually. Mm-hmm. Sorry, I thought my internet went for a second. I was just waiting, but yeah, that's what keeps people in that cult mindset, is because they have the sense of connection and brotherhood, a sense of a tribe that they're, everybody looks at them and tells them, "Oh, thank you for your service," and they have this uniform that, it's all these different factors that are built up, but it makes it really, really hard for people to step out of that mindset and then actually look at what they're doing. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, they even fucking tell you in boot camp that they're brainwashing you. I mean, it's no fucking secret. They just tell you. And I mean, all gung ho and young and stupid, you just fucking go along with it because you've been fucking traumatized. And then you want that acceptance from everybody, and you want to have, you have this trauma. And maybe, I know for me, the reason I joined is because I had a whole lot of rage and hatred, and I needed a way to express that. But then that was a way you could go express it and then get rewarded for it.
Right. Correct. Mm-hmm. Yeah. And then that's the thing is, yeah. No, sorry. Go ahead, Logan.
I was just gonna say, you're also getting the pat on the back from your brothers, your so-called brothers. You're all like, "Oh, good one,"
Yes.
Go ahead.
Yeah, and I was just gonna say, I guess at some point your association or relationship with your drill instructor, is almost the same. That pattern of being around it for approval of that, unholy masculine father figure.
The daddy will, Daddy said I did good.
Right. Yeah. And you're seeking that reward out.
Yes. Yeah. This is bringing up something. Whenever I first got to basic training in the Marine Corps, one of the first gunnery sergeants that was bringing my platoon in was talking to us, and he said this thing that sticks out to me, and it took your parents, 18 years to fuck you up, and we're going to unfuck you in 3 months.
Wow. Talk about gaslighting.
Yeah. That's incredible. That's unbelievable.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think that's kind of heavy. There's a lot in that,
I remember, in fact, that when I was in basic, I was in the Air Force. I remember there was one of the drill instructors, it wasn't ours, but one that was within the same squadron or whatever, that called all his trainees children. How ironic. It's almost like you wonder if they were doing that consciously, or they subconsciously knew that was the dynamic at play, that it was this sort of unholy paternal, aspect that they were embodying, calling them children.
Right.
Yeah, no, because that's definitely one thing that they play on there, is that they, your drill instructors, they call you this piece of shit. They totally break, and they tell you this. They have to break you down and then rebuild you. What is that? It's dark alchemy.
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
Right.
The blackening.
They're breaking you down. They're taking apart your whole sense of identity and then rebuilding it. So then as you go along slowly, because you get better and better, and you've done more and more of what they say, you get more and more approval from that parental figure that you're looking up to. Because as a recruit, you look at your drill instructor not only as like this really terrifying, menace. Some of those guys were really fucking mean, no doubt. But also this like kind of godlike father figure that you're looking up to, that you just want to be like them because you want that fucking approval.
Right. And also, I wanted to throw in there, because this dynamic between the drill instructor and then the brotherhood or the camaraderie that comes with that, I think this is a very dark occult psychological dynamic that's going on here, because what they're doing is they know that people can be unified against a common enemy. So that drill instructor there is the big scary father figure, and that's going to make you and your brothers and sisters literally more tightly knit. It's like you look out for each other. You say like, oh, you got a string there on your uniform, because you don't want them to get yelled at just as much, because you know that, and of course it all works under this blanket punishment. You know, they do that. That's a big thing in the military, is if one person fucks up, they punish the whole flight.
Everybody fucks up, and then the squad will take care of that guy. Exactly. Yeah. So
that's the same way the government works too. I mean, again, they don't have to switch up their tactics, because it fucking works. The mind control works, and it's so simple. And another thing I wanted to compare that same mentality of brotherhood, well, you hear military guys say a lot, if you try to come after one of my brothers, we're going to have a problem. And it's like, but because they're not in alignment with natural law, because they are the ones instigating violence and causing, initiating harm to others, the self-defense that's coming to them is in the right. So they have no right to say, oh, you're coming after my family. Yeah, because you're initiating the harm here. And it works the same way with the police, with the thin blue line. And incidentally, you see the same thing under what's called omerta in the mafia terminology. It's the same exact dynamic of, like, you fuck with my brothers and you're fucking with me. And it's like, well, that's actually an okay dynamic as long as you're in alignment with natural law and you're not actually going out causing harm to people.
Right.
And what is that cult giving you? The feeling of safety.
Yes.
Because the world's dangerous and you need somebody to keep you safe.
And you can call your boys in blue, call your little backup. Because without them, you're actually a little scared coward.
Absolutely.
Yeah, and that's kind of interesting, because this sort of made me remember about sort of some of the same, I don't know, incidents that happen with just kids on the playground. That that's early brotherhood brought together. When you find your friends on the playground, and if you want to disassociate in some way, you should have the right to do that. But there shouldn't be this. Like I said, there should be this healthy brotherhood that exists between all these different individuals. That's built early on the playground, and you can you can write a whole entire book. Actually, I could probably write a whole entire book on the dynamics on the playground and
our first
being with your brothers, right?
Our first episode on the show here was bullies on the playground, and
that's right.
We were discussing the inversion dynamic of how the bully themselves have no power if the other kids would actually unite against that common enemy. There's that dynamic again, except who's the actual dominate? Who's the instigator? Are we banding together to cause harm against other people because we perceive, the American people as the enemy, versus the government being the real enemy? That's what they do, is they polarize you so that you take a stand again and you're fighting the wrong enemy. They're giving you a proxy enemy so that you never go after the real actual threat.
Yeah, and that's really interesting you mentioned that, because again, like going back to that, tell the authority figure, find the authority figure, call the cops, find someone that's going to protect you and solve the conflict.
Yes.
And then you're not teaching, a child early on the playground how to handle these situations on their own. That's built into their psyche from beginning to end.
I'll just say this now. If you see something, say something.
Yeah. Tell the authority figure, tell the mafia, tell the boys in blue,
If your brother hiding pornography under his bed, we want to know about it.
Yeah, right.
I think another point that we can look at here too that can also tie back into people ending up becoming border followers and things is the crime violence correlation between young men who were circumcised, brought up in abusive homes and things. I don't have the specific statistics on me, but there's a strong correlation between men who were circumcised and men who commit, violent crime or, have, deep rage and anger issues later on in life. And that can not only just come out in like violent crime or things like that, but also just in marriages, like in relationships of, that not being able to express in a healthy manner or losing your temper or, whatever that may be. I know definitely early on when I was younger, that was something, I had some struggle with and things of being able to like know how to actually express properly because I was never fucking taught. I had to go through the apophatic learning experience and learn through, the natural law process of,
right.
Okay, well, that didn't fucking work very well. So I need to try something else here.
Yeah. And isn't it interesting that the cuffs they put on you are the same as the gurney that you're strapped to? You're cuffed down, you're strapped down, and that trauma plays itself out later on,
You could almost look at that like, you could almost look like as a sort of gaslighting too, because what do they do when you're in a mental institution and you're unsafe? They strap you down in the same way, so it's almost like instilling you're crazy. Don't fight this. This is for your own good.
You're not sovereign.
Yeah, right.
Other
Exactly.
Yeah, take care of you.
Yeah.
Wow. Yeah. It goes deep, man. It goes so deep into
very
the psyche.
deep. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Absolutely.
Let's see.
And
do you think
Greg,
we have enough time to? Yeah. Sorry.
You mentioned the medicating a little bit, which we touched on, but I wanted to get a little more into that because you see that a lot with your job as an educator working in the school systems.
Yeah, it's prevalent, especially more so today because the amount of medication has almost doubled over time. From the early 2000s, you have more kids medicated now than any time. So like, what is that doing to the psyche? What is that doing to the body and the brain?
Yeah.
There obviously we know about a lot of the side effects, but I mean it messes with your sleep. I mean your circadian rhythm. The fact that there's a kid's circadian rhythm at that age, at least the teenagers, they have their energy. Most of their energy is at night. Whereas our energy is mostly in the morning. So you're drugging them so that they either can't sleep at all at a time where they need to, or you're pepping them up and getting them a stimulant that will keep them up, playing video games all night and, avoiding reality around them and avoiding things that they need to do in their own life.
Right.
Yeah.
And I think what that's doing is it's not only just suppressing the physical aspects, but it's suppressing just boyhood in general, and the experience that the boy, is able to have in society, and it never reflects society outside of the school. The school is the prison. So how do we keep these people in line? Well, we have to drug them because it's the only way to keep them in line. If we don't, they rebel.
Yeah.
So.
In fact, I'm getting this intuitive hit here. So what is the one word that they really single out when diagnosing and addressing these ADD, ADHD, hyperactivity? And it's, again, it happens with males and females both, but the action is the masculine. So if he's overly active, they're trying to suppress that. Very interesting.
Yeah, they want to keep him lost in his head. They want to keep him from expressing and actually taking it to the next level, taking that to the second level before there's an action. And so all the thoughts remain in the head. And so, and all those, and the negative thoughts, especially.
Get trapped in the intellectual maze then.
Exactly. And that's why
that's good, dude.
That's the left brain trap. Absolutely.
And the other thing too, personally for me, a big part of why they had such a problem with me and was throwing the medication at me, because of my performance in school, was daydreaming, the imagination. That's the feminine. Daydreaming of not what is, but what could be, the potentiality there. they see that as a problem. You're
Down
not
here.
focusing on.
Yeah.
You're not focusing on what we're trying to teach you or whatever. Pay attention.
Suppressing the magic.
Yes, they're
Yeah.
Magic Nation, exactly.
Yeah, no, that's good, dude. That's great.
That's what the never-ending story is all about. When
Mhm.
Greg, you're studying that movie right now. The nothing that's coming in is literally the nothing that is the absence of imagination and just the mind.
Right. So many occult allegories in that movie, and especially, now that I've looked so deeply into it, there's so many aspects, that I'm trying to teach my son based on a lot of these things in the movie of, the action of the hero and all of the battles that has to basically have to ensue, that he has to confront. It's incredible for his developing mind to watch something that, he may or may not be able to recognize on the surface consciously while he's watching it, but it's registering, it's registering
in the subconscious
mind.
That's the beauty of allegory and storytelling. Right. That's why it's so effective for children.
And just
that right brain stimulation.
Right. And as soon as we see it, when we see it later, the movie as an adult, now everything comes to the surface and it makes sense.
So I think this is probably going to wrap us up for this part 1 of this topic here. We're going to go ahead and continue this on into next week, where we get into the solutions aspect of it, and kind of exploring what are ways that we can step into healing this very real problem that is that's becoming worse, honestly. So Greg, if you'd like to go ahead and talk about what you're up to, what are you working on right now, and where can people find you?
Yeah, thanks. The website is anarchylifting.com. I usually do a lot of the physical training online, developing programs. So you can catch me there, anarchylifting.com. Also have Instagram page, anarchylifting, and Facebook as well. Under the same name. And right now I'm working on the occult study for beginners, just little study guides and lessons and projects to develop for the homeschool kids, which is the big project that I'm looking at. That's going to be a bigger long-term thing that I'm really excited about and can't wait to develop. And right now I'm working on the never-ending story thing. So that the URL has not been purchased for that, but I'm hoping maybe occultforbeginners.com will be the URL for that. So we'll see as far as that's concerned, but that's so something cool. I'm going to be releasing soon. So,
oh man, I'm so excited about that. I just think that is such a great idea. We need to, get to the children. But no, really, it works the same way. The reason that the dark occultists go after the children is the same reason that we should, just for the right reasons. You know what I mean? Really installing that proper operating system during those formative years.
Right. And it's going to be important going forward to understand, especially for me when I'm working with different age groups, what's going to catch on as far as their demographic. I mean, for a kid, the never-ending story may be something that is attractive to them because they see the small boy as the archetype, but to a teenager, yeah, exactly. And what are teenagers going to relate more to? So I'm trying to figure that out as I go forward. Right. And
Lord of the Rings.
Yeah.
As a Tolkien fan,
that's the thing. And I think listen, I'm probably going to need you guys big time as far as movie allegories that I have not yet delved into or understood. So yeah.
That would be incredibly helpful. I just wanted to say quick that what I love about what you're doing with that, Greg, is that's such a great solution to addressing these issues. And that's what we're really going to be delving into in part 2 is the solutions of how do we go about addressing this and transforming ourselves.
Right. It's easy to point our fingers at all the problems and, most people are aware there's something wrong with the world, But
Right.
we've got an overabundance of keyboard warriors that just want to bitch about everything and complain, but they're not really taking action. They're not really presenting solutions. And so I think Brian and I, and Greg, you as well, we've really made it our mission to, you know, like, okay, we can see the matrix. Now what? Now, like, what do we actually do about it?
Right.
Yeah.
That's exactly it. And following through and making sure that we can educate the next generation.
Absolutely.
Man. So yeah,
Great.
we'd like to remind everyone we're all.
Yeah,
Sorry.
I think your audio's.
Yeah.
Okay.
We I just want to remind everyone we are open to taking schedule for consultations. Through the Vedic astrology readings that Brian is currently exclusively doing until I get trained up. 9 more readings, which we're both kind of cooperating on as I'm getting trained, and then the adaptive personal coaching consultations, which either of us are able to give. And then we have a bundle called the Reflections package that offer all 3 of those at a discounted rate, which is, you know, a really good step that you can take to getting more into yourself, delving deep into the, you know, self-psychology and learning what, you know, before you know where you're going, you got to know where you are. So looking within, figuring out what are the, you know, you're playing poker and you're like, what are my cards right now? How can I play this? So.
Right. And in that, I'll be, you know, what I do with these is I can actually then look at, you know, your energetic needs and where you're at, and I can identify what you need to work with and design rituals specifically with those. And not only can I do that with astrology, but with the runes as well. So when you start combining these arts and gnosis, I can't stress enough the level of information I'm able to really pull out of these things. So very, very transformational tool to be able to access.
Yeah, no joke, dude, for real. And also Brian and I are very, very excited to announce that we've finally completed our Toolbox video series that is completely free. If you're interested in that, there's a link that you can click down below that will take you to the landing page that, you know, you just put in your email and your name, and we'll give you the link, and you can download that free video series that teaches 4 different spiritual practices that you can put to use right away and start, you know, taking action, start taking control, taking your power back, and you know, what are you going to do about it? Is that we're offering solutions. And
solutions, yeah, exactly.
Totally free to you. All you got to do is sign up and you'll get the link. So yeah, we're very pleased with how it turned out, and we think it's going to be a really, you know, useful tool for people. So I think that's going to wrap us up for this episode today. Thanks everyone for watching. Like and subscribe the video if you like the content, and we'll see you next week. Until then, be empowered, inspired, and encouraged.
Yes.